Hey everyone, my name is Furquan Ahmed. I'm a senior implementation engineer here at Netreo. Hope you all are having an amazing time here at Netreo user group get together, aka Nugget 2022. I'll be a speaker for this afternoon on the topic how to keep your M365 estate in check using Netreo. If you have any questions during the session, I'm available in the live chat to answer them. So let's get started. Ever since companies have gone remote, pre-COVID or post-COVID, the need of monitoring of communication platforms such as Teams, Exchange, Skype, and other product suites similar have become necessity of every IT organization. Imagine having a Monday morning to start with issues such as Teams meeting not loading, an Outlook mailbox not refreshing, mails not coming in on time. It can certainly hinder anyone's work schedule. These M365 services such as Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, Outlook, Yammer have become essential in day-to-day life of every IT individual. An outage or hindrance in any of these services can certainly cause panic among workers and causes them to know whether it's just them who is being affected by the service or if it's an outage experienced by a broader group of people. Working with the Netreo M365 Insight gives a broader view on these M365 services without having the administrator to log on onto the Microsoft Service Administration portal, which provides the oversight of these M365 services. A typical pain point that an M365 administrator experiences in monitoring of these services is to understand and monitor the license usage of these services per users, understand the resource utilization of these services, and also the digital experience for each of these services from different geographical locations where the remote users of the company are accessing these services from. Netreo's M365 module actually helps solve all these monitoring pain points with ease because of its API-based integration with the Microsoft 365 service tenant. These configuration of this M365 module in Netreo requires very minimal to least administrative assistance. With the setup only required with an app registration, the only setup required at an Azure administration level, and configuration of those credentials are required in the 365 module inside Netreo. In this session today, I'll be doing a demonstration on M365's Insight module in Netreo, the dashboards, and what is the overview that you see inside the Netreo, what Netreo single pane of glass can provide monitoring, and what are the best practices when it comes to setting up of templates to manage alerts of your M365 services, and how to keep your estate in check, and what are the different types of alerts that Netreo can publish for your 365 services. So let's jump on to my demo lab environment and let's take a look at the Netreo's M365 module. Okay. As soon as you log on onto your Netreo system, you will log on onto your default dashboard. Typically, that's the consolidated dashboard that you log on onto. Once you're licensed with the M365 license, you will have a dashboard, a default dashboard available to you, an M365 Insight dashboard available to you, which would be displayed whether or not you configure the M365 Insight configurations, the credentials or not. Once you click on that this particular Insight dashboard, it will take you onto a web page similar to this. If you have your M365 Insight elements configured, you'll see the statuses right away. In my demo lab environment, I already have these variables configured. But if you don't have it configured, you could readily configure it by clicking on this settings icon up here. I will be going over configuration of M365 Insight module in the later part of the session today. Let's quickly take a look at what this dashboard shows and what are these alarms and the symbols indicate, and what are the metrics that one administrator would keenly see on this dashboard and the metrics that they would be keen to worry about. As you can see, the top 6 services of an M365 service suite is what we monitor here at Netreo's M365 Insight module. The 6 services being Exchange, OneDrive, SharePoint, Skype, Yammer, and Teams. As you can see, I have 2 alerts currently going on for my Exchange and Teams. And these indications, let's go over each of these variables that are being displayed on my dashboard. Um, we have a status variable that signifies and denotes the overall status of this particular 365 service from the Netreo core appliance. The API, however, responds or correlates to information that Netreo's API is receiving from your 365 admin portal. Whatever information we receive from your Microsoft 365 admin portal concerning these M365 services is what we report inside Netreo in detail. Microsoft have set a typical set of service alerts that it signifies on the service administration portal, which you could go on to and have a look. The website on which you can see the 365 service alerts is go on to status.office365.com. Here you can see the service admin center, whether it is available. If you have your privileges that give you that information, you can click on to service health dashboard. On the service health dashboard, you can see the various health statuses of your various services and if there are any active issues currently. As you could see, I have 2 active issues that are being reported by my 365 admin center. Here you can see I have meetings for users in Chile experiencing an incorrect time, and the services that are affected by this are Exchange Online and Microsoft Teams. And then we have another issue where macOS issues are facing repetitive password prompt on the Mac desktop client, similar to mine. And as you could see, I have those 2 issues being reported by my Netreo as well, with the service indication for Exchange and also for Teams. And you could see in my Netreo, I have 2 incidents created for both those services. Application service failure for Microsoft 365 Teams and Microsoft 365 Exchange, and both of them are reporting those degradation alerts. Microsoft denotes these services in 8 different service statuses. The 8 different service statuses that are denoted by Microsoft are which we will be seeing in the next web page. You can go on to the service health dashboard of Microsoft to see those service health statuses in detail as what those service variables denote. What does service degradation mean? What does the other service status variables mean? And you could click on this link here from the Service Health Administration webpage, or you could also go on to the Netreo knowledge base, and there's an article that will refer to that same link as well. If you go on to this particular link here, it will show the various status definitions. So among 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 status variables, Netreo will create an alert incident on the 3 of the variables, which is investigating, service degradation, and service interruption. Among these 3 status variable, investigating and service degradation are warning incidents that gets created inside Netreo, whereas service interruption is going to be a critical incident that Netreo will create based on the status definition that it has received via its API call to the Microsoft Admin Center. Whereas all these other services will revert the service back into an OK status. restoring service, extended recovery, investigation suspended, service restored, false positive, and post-incident report published. These are the OK status definitions that we receive from the Microsoft Admin Center. If you want to know in depth about what these status variables are and the resolution time for these variables, you will have to log on onto the Microsoft Admin Center to get that information. Netreo will give you a brief oversight on the status variables and the statuses of these 365 services. But if you want to know the exact troubleshooting or correlation that is being proceeded by Microsoft, you will have to log on onto the 365 admin portal to see those troubleshoot that the Microsoft is providing. Okay, now let's jump back to the Netreo web page and see what are the various other metrics that we see on the 365 admin 365 dashboard. Since Netreo prides itself in displaying itself as a single pane of glass, what are the metrics that you see on a singular view? On the dashboard here itself, you will see the 6 services and the overall response time for each of these services from the Netreo core appliance, and also the response time of these services from the remote agents. Mind if may I ask, what are these remote agents? Netreo provides the capabilities. Netreo provides the capability for you to deploy agents on your remote desktop PCs that are provisioned across the globe onto various locations. And these agents that are installed on your remote desktops can, in fact, make these same API calls with this service account credentials to these API to these 365 services and do this synthetic transaction to find the service response time for these 365 services, so that way you have the overall view on how these services are performing from your various geographical locations compared to your core appliance location. So that way you get the overall picture whether the outage is being experienced by all your employees in various geographical locations, or if it's being only affected in a specific geographical location. Deploying of these remote agents is pretty straightforward, and I'll be going over how to deploy a remote agent in the short session forward. Okay, now let's see what are the other metrics that we see here on the dashboard. It also displays the health statuses of the various remote agents. Here, as you can see, I have 10 remote agents deployed in my environment, and their elements are all reporting okay as its status. And a quick map view of the various geographical locations of my remote agents and the health statuses, and also a tab here to display the usage of all my licenses across my user licenses across my services, and the storage usage per service across my 365 services as well. In my lab environment, I don't have the license or the privilege to get that information, hence my demo environment is not showing that from my service account. Anyways, well, your service account will have that privilege and you will be able to see that information. Now, along with that, you will also see furthermore information that Netreo displays. If you click on each individual services, you will see the information about the response time for each of these services from your core appliance, as well as from your various other remote agents, and then the storage used by each of these individual 365 services and the active users in the last 24-hour period for these 365 services. Okay. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at how to configure your 365 estate inside Netreo's system. Okay, so you can configure your 365 estate by clicking on this settings widget, settings icon here from the 365 dashboard, or else you can also click on administration, modules, and Microsoft 365 Insight. Okay, let's go ahead and click on this settings icon here, and that will take us to this particular web page. Here, it requires us to fill in with certain credentials like application ID, password, tenant ID, Skype ID, password, Microsoft 365 ID, and service account password for that. So few of the requirements that you need, few of the credential requirements that are needed here. Firstly, you will have to create an app. You will have to register an app on your Microsoft Azure portal. You will also need to create a service account so that Netreo can use the service account and launch into your Microsoft 365 services and validate the connectivity to them, and also uh, work on gathering the response time by logging into those 365 services. So your service account, a Microsoft 365 service account, a Skype service account to make that call transaction to see your Skype connectivity as well, and an email service account so that Netreo can use that service account to send and receive emails. You could either use one single service account to send an email using the service account to itself and logging on to that same service account mailbox and looking at that email to see if it was received and how long it took for it to send an email and to receive it. Or you could have two separate email accounts, one to send an email, one to receive an email, and log on to the receive mailbox to see if if the mail was received. Either way, yeah, whichever way you seem to be nicer for you. Okay. Now, in order to set up this on your Azure portal, Azure side, fairly simple steps. You could also look at the Netreo knowledge base article. Go ahead and log on to docs.netreo.com and type in how to configure Microsoft 365 Insight in your search, and it'll let you take you to this article. In this article, you will also see a hyperlink on how to configure Azure for M365 Insight monitoring. Click on that, and that will take you to another article with screenshots on step-by-steps on how to configure it. So once you are on your Azure portal, what you will be doing is you'll be searching for Azure Active Directory, and you'll be clicking onto it. And once you are on it, you'll be copying up your tenant ID information. Since we'll be needing that, we'll be authenticating to your 365 tenant. And then once you click on it, then you will click on app registrations, and then you'll click on new registration. You'll click on new registration so that we will register a new Microsoft 365 Insight app. You will give it a name, Netreo M65 Insight, as per the screenshot, and then you will click on accounts in this organizational directory only as a default parameter. You could also select multi-tenant if you want that as well. That's fine, but if you have a single tenant, let's just use that. That's the default one, and you can leave it as it is. And then once you are done with that, then you'll go ahead and copy the application client ID, which is an important variable that we'll need to copy back onto the Netreo credential screen. Once you get that information, then you will go ahead and click on certificates and secrets, so that way we create an Netreo secret key, which is what we'll be using to authenticate to your tenant. And we'll go ahead and click on new client secret, and we'll go ahead and create a new client secret with an expiration. I would go ahead and give it a later date so that way it doesn't expire anytime soon. Once it goes ahead and creates that key, go ahead and click on copy the value. Make sure you do copy the value of the key, because as soon as you click on OK and get out of there, the value is going to be hashed out and you can no longer retrieve it unless you go ahead and create a new one. Okay. Once you go ahead and copy the value onto a notepad and save it somewhere safe, we'll go ahead on to the next stage. On the next stage, what we'll be doing is we'll be creating up and we'll be assigning some API permissions. So once you are done with that, they will go ahead and click on API permissions, and we'll be granting some permissions. There are two types of API permission that we'll be granting. One is a Microsoft Graph-based API permissions, and one is Microsoft 365 Management API permissions. So again, there are two types of permissions in Microsoft Graph that will be granting. One is a delegated permission, which is user read permission that will be granting. And then there will be there will be 6 set of application permissions that will be granting, which is service health, read all, group read all, directory read all, user read all, application read all, and reports read all in the application permissions, again under the same Microsoft Graph category. And then lastly, you'll be also granting Microsoft 365 Management APIs application permission for service health read. Once those permissions are granted, make sure you grant admin consent for your 365 app. This is very important for the API to function. You need to grant admin consent to your app. Once you have this information configured, fairly good, let's go ahead back to our Netreo administration screen. We'll go ahead and copy up our application ID that we have copied from your 365 Azure portal. In the password section, we will go ahead and copy the client secret key. And in the tenant ID information, we'll copy our Azure tenant ID information here. And we will configure here our service account credentials. Once we have those credentials configured, we'll go ahead and click on save. And then we'll jump on and look at once you have this thing configured, give it about 5 to 10 minutes, and Netreo should start authenticating with your 365 admin portal and collecting up your performance metrics and service availability statuses for your various 365 services. If you want to configure any thresholds for your 365 services from your core Netreo appliance, you can click on the threshold tab here from the service administration webpage, 365 administration webpage, and go ahead and configure thresholds. You could go ahead and disable any threshold if you don't wish to alert on it from this webpage. You could also configure the service availability for your 365 services from this web page as well. One thing to keep in mind and note here is that you could disable alerting on a 365 service availability status, but you cannot disable creation of incident in Netreo for the 365 services. Once you have your M365 module created, Netreo will create incidents for your M365 service failures as it detects by its API call. You have the ability, whether you want an incident email, an alert notification, and an action to be generated for that service failure, or if you want it to be suppressed completely. But you can't suppress creation of incident in itself because it's a genuine issue, and Netreo would want you to know that an issue has been detected by your 365 admin portal. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at how to configure a remote agent in your environment. In order to configure a remote agent in your environment so that way it can do the synthetic transactions from your remote geographical locations, you will be clicking on administration, system, and remote agent. Once you're on this screen, you'll be clicking on the plus button here and give a name of your remote agent and the geographical location where this remote agent will be provisioned in, and then the platform of the operating platform, basically the operating system on which this remote agent is going to be installed. Currently, Netreo supports the 6 flavors of operating systems where this remote agent can be installed, which is Windows, Ubuntu, CentOS, Red Hat, and OpenSUSE. Once you click on it and you click on create, it will go ahead and create a remote agent of which you can download the executable by clicking on this button. Once this executable is downloaded, you can then go ahead and copy this executable onto your remote system and double click it. If it is a Windows system, it is a PowerShell script, and you can double click it and install the PowerShell. Running that PowerShell and install that agent inside your system. If it is a Linux system, go ahead and tar the file and install the contents, and that will install the agent service as well there too. Once you have the agent installed, that particular executable also carries the service account credential information as well, so that way that remote agent can do those synthetic transactions to validate the network connectivity to your M365 services from there as well. And on these remote agents, you can click onto these remote agents to see the various metrics that it can gather. It can do the same kind of synthetic transactions as your core appliance would do and gather the application service response time and also monitor the service availability from those remote locations to your 365 admin portal. And alert you on those statuses. You could apply these service checks and thresholds using the Netreo template, similar to how you would apply any other service checks and thresholds using device templates. Now let's go ahead and take a look at some of the reports that are available inside Netreo that would help you monitor your 365 estate. You could use the built-in report capability in Netreo to monitor the 365 time and state. You could do this report and monitor your 365 estates time and state, how well they have been performing in your environment, and if they have been having any issues. As you could see, all my 365 checks have returned with 100% uptime and have been filtered out. If you have had any issues with your M365 service checks and they haven't been performing correctly, they would come back with an issue and would be showing up the downtime in here. Okay, and well, that was my 365 dashboard and the information that one can see at a glance in a view onto your 365 administration web page, and how you can go ahead and configure that inside Netreo, and what kind of alerts would you be seeing inside the Netreo system. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to support@netreo.com or drop a question in the chat here as well. And you can also reach out to me at fkhaja@netreo.com. Had pleasure hosting you on this session today, and feel free to carry on and enjoy furthermore sessions here at Nugget 2022. Happy to have you guys on board here. Thank you.
Come on.